Okay, thanks, Joe. Last will be Dr. Layla Hudson, who's going to talk about oil production, disruption, and market dynamics.
Okay. Let's see, do we have my maps up there, actually? Okay. All right, I'm going to try and run through this really quickly because I think we've got so much to talk about and so much great stuff that we've heard, and I don't want to bore you with statistics. Let me just run through quickly some of the statistics, and you'll see them represented in different ways graphically up here. Libya has the 9th largest oil reserves, known oil reserves in the world, the 1st largest reserves of Africa. In good times, or in stable times, I should say, it's the 17th largest producer and the 3rd largest producer in Africa. So the size of the reserves doesn't necessarily translate into the size of production. And it accounts, again, in stable times, up until recently, for about 2% of global production, 1.8 to 1.6 million barrels a day, again, prior to the situation that we've got going on now. As Dr. Bonine pointed out earlier, the quality of Libyan crude is very high quality, and it's extraordinarily cheap to produce. In some of these fields, you can produce a barrel for about $1. And its proximity to Europe makes it an even more important node in the global oil economy. At current or recent rates of production, they estimate about 63 years left to go. What's happened over the last 3 weeks is a dramatic fall off in production. Let me see if I can. These are historical production levels. Again, you can see that in the late 1960s and the 70s, Libya was able to produce more than 3 million barrels a day. Again, today it's down to just under 2 million barrels a day. And if we were to extend this graph out a few lines, we would see that since February 17th, production has fallen by 2/3 to just 500 million barrels a day. It's a pretty dramatic sounding figure, and it causes alarm. I just want to point out, however, that
500,000.
Sorry?
500,000.
Yeah. What did I say?
500,000.
Oh, sorry, 500,000. I'm not good with numbers. Okay, that sounded really alarming. This sounds less alarming, but the slack has been taken up, an adjustment in the oil price to over $100 a barrel, and indeed it looks like global production has been adjusted by other OPEC members, not just Saudi Arabia, who gets all the attention, but even neighboring Algeria seems to be able to increase production to take up the slack. So this figure is not as alarming as perhaps it seems at first. Oil in Libya is produced by the National Oil Company of Libya, which is down 50% in its production. And I want to basically put up a little map here. Okay, we can look at where the Libyan oil goes for a second. Again, it's clearly the major source for Europe, with 32% going to Italy, 14% to Germany, an important 10% to France and Spain, 10% to China, and 5% to the United States, with 3% to Brazil. Okay, but this is the map that I really wanted to look at here for a second, because it shows the geographical difference that we were introduced to at the beginning, the difference between the Tripolitanian and Fezzan regions in the west versus the Cyrenaican region in the east. And you can see that they form two clear and distinct oil-producing systems. Okay, the one in the east is basically under rebel control in the Benghazi area, okay? And its major port cities, you'll have heard about Ras Lanuf, which is on and off under heavy attack, okay? But this system seems to have gone over to the rebels. If you look at where the ongoing and most brutal fighting right now is, it's in the western part of this picture, in the Zawiya system. And you can see why that is. It is the outlet. It's not just a town in close proximity to Tripoli, but it's also the refinery and terminal for the entire western system of oil production. Not the most important one, but a very important one. I think this helps us understand why the fighting is so brutal. It's because the stakes are very high. So in addition to all the popular and cultural and political reforming of institutions after decades of Gaddafi's undermining them both in theory and in practice, these systems are key to the reestablishment of a sovereign state. So the stakes are very high. So when you see Gaddafi pounding Ras Lanuf in the last few days and in the next few days, it's a desperate, probably vain attempt to regain control over the 80% of the oil reserves that are in the Sirte field and that exit the system through these different eastern ports. And if you look at the very intense and brutal fighting in Zawiya, it's because that one has still not fallen entirely. That seems to be a system that Gaddafi can still hope to control, and without which his claim to the state becomes increasingly tenuous. So I think that's why you see this. I want to show you another couple of maps. This is a map. You can't really make it out very well, but these are the different multinational and foreign contractors who run parts of the different oil fields, of the different pipelines, of the different refineries. And you can see it's a pretty multicultural, multi-entity endeavor. So there are lots of corporate entities, there are lots of outside powers who have investments in this particular setup. And we've seen it in the form of evacuations and extractions of expat oil workers and things like this. But in a sense, there's a real question of sovereignty here. Whoever controls these two different east and west systems has a major piece of what it takes to guarantee Libya's sovereignty. There are also many other players outside the system, and these are mostly European and American oil companies, who also have an interest, and as we saw in the last slide that Johan put up, who know different parts of this system and have different investments in it. What's happening right now that seems very interesting, and you all will have noticed that France is spearheading the no-fly zone effort, and France has been the first to recognize the new Benghazi-based government. One of the things that is happening and being reported on in the Financial Times, even as we speak, seems to me to be a promising development for breaking the kind of stalemate that the no-fly zone and other efforts so far have not been able to do. That is that the biggest subsidiary of Libya's national oil company, comprising Libya's second largest oil company, is called Agoko or Agaco, and it has begun to separate from its parent company. It controls the large Sirte Basin. It has outlets onto the Tobruk terminal, and it actually apparently controls, oops, sorry, I don't have a laser here, sorry, never mind. It also seems to have control, and I think it's the Hamada southwestern oil field. All of these places, the production is way off, but what seems to be underway right now is attempts for this corporate entity to make its own arrangements with outside purchasers of oil and customers, and thereby channel that revenue directly into the Benghazi government. And that's what's happening right now. And it seems to me like an interesting way out of the no-fly zone stalemate, which is going to be with us for a long time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, yeah, let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions now, okay? One question only, please. Keep them short, direct, and polite. Thanks. Tina first. Use the mic so we can pick them up if that's okay. I know you're close by.
Hi, I have a question for the Dr. Allah al-Hadidi. I was wondering how you feel about the fact that the leadership of the revolutionaries has sort of been hijacked, in my opinion, by the minister from Gaddafi's government, the Minister of Justice. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about this American, I think, attempt to classify this conflict as a civil war when you consider that so many people are breaking off from Gaddafi?
Mr. Abdul Jalil, Mustafa Abdul Jalil, who's the former Minister of Justice, well known, especially in the east side of the country, well respected actually. And he defected from Gaddafi's regime to start with. So, and he's the politician. So, right now, lack of the system in Libya, we don't have parties, political parties. So he was qualified enough to run temporarily the leadership until we establish the well-known, or the election and so forth, and the constitution and so forth. So now we are lacking of any of the leaders, so that's why since he's well-known and well-respected, everybody trusted him, west and south and east, and everybody, every city that's liberated, they usually contact him immediately and they say, we are following. What's your second question then?
The second one is, how do you feel about the characterization that it's a civil war?
I disagree with it as a civil war, because it's not a civil war. It's between rebels and the government. So it's not between tribes or cities or country to country. Or it's a government that has most of the power, and rebel civilians that capturing whatever they can and to fight back for their protection. So it's not civil war.